Okay, hello everyone, and I think we already somehow started our lecture, and today we have our good colleague, Professor Stamatios Papadakis from Greece, University of Crete, if I think it's correct. He is affiliated with Department of Preschool Education, and I would say deeply involved in educational technology, not only in preschool education, and many other areas. For example, wide and large research interests, scientific interests, including mobile learning, especially on using smart mobile devices and different applications in preschool and primary education, and so on and so on. So it can be so long introduction. Okay, Stamatios, now it's your time, please.
Yes. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity and the invitation. Of course, it's very nice to have this time a webinar with students in service teachers from Lithuania. It's first time I'm speaking to Lithuanian teachers, although I have done a lot of webinars with European Commission and we have teachers around Europe. Okay, that's true what you said about me. Just I'm not a professor, I'm just an assistant professor. Yes, my specialty is in preschool education and especially in educational technology. I'm trying to examine how to effectively introduce programming environments in general so as to educate young age children in computational thinking skill, coding skills, and so on. And also this is the main idea of our today presentation, and I will try to make it a bit more interactive than just speaking all the time. So our today meeting is going to be separated in two different parts. One, unfortunately, a bit more theoretical. I will try to convince you why it's necessary to introduce children in preschool education and primary education in computational thinking skills, coding activities, and so on. And later on the second part, we are going to move on a more interactive section. We are going to work with two programming environments that not myself, but international research has highlighted the last decade as appropriate tools to introduce young age children in this kind of activities. These two programming environments, of course, are orientated for novice programmers, not for experts, and they are Scratch Junior for young age children and Scratch for adult children from age 8 years old up to 12, 13, 15, it depends on. So I'm going to upload my presentation. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to upload my presentation. So can you see now my presentation?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so as already told, my today presentation is going to be in two parts. And the first part is the necessity of computational thinking. And as already mentioned, why coding must begin in kindergarten and primary school. So I will try to examine in a structured and evidence-based way why the development of computational thinking and early coding skills has become a fundamental requirement for formal education, not only in Europe, but around the globe, especially in civilized Western countries. And why it's important to start not only from the secondary school years, but also from the very first years of formal education. And for that, I'm meaning kindergarten and primary school education. So I will try our discussion here, and I also want each time you have a question, a query, or something to mention, please take the speech and answer, talk. I don't like speaking all the time and you are just listening. I will appreciate to have a conversation. Okay, so My discussion today is grounded on three major sources I'm using all the time, also with my students and my research papers: the OECD Future of Education and Skills 2030 framework, the EU Digital Education Action Plan, and of course, the European Education Area Vision 2025 for inclusive, high-quality digital education for all. So, some of you might query that if you already know these documents, are not explicitly technology-driven documents. In fact, they are policy frameworks which are built around well-being, equity, lifelong learning, and also for preparing children for a highly complex world. And this is the main point why we have to introduce computational thinking and coding skills since the years of kindergarten, because the consistent conclusion across all these frameworks, if you read them, is clear. Computational thinking has become a core competency for the 21st century, and not only a poor technical skill as was believed in the early 80s, 90s, and so on. To move on, in my next slide, we are going to discuss now about the changing landscape of childhood learning. And central question we must ask is, why should very young age children, 4, 5, 6 years old, must be introduced to computational thinking and relative skills? First of all, to answer this question, we must first understand the world our students now are entering. So, children today are growing up in the middle of what both the OECD and the European Commission describe as a deep structural transformation of work, communication, and citizenship. Our children are surrounded by interconnected devices, data-driven decision systems, algorithmic recommendations, automated toys, AI-enhanced learning platforms, and digital infrastructure that influences how they play, how they learn, and of course, how they interact with each other. So, even when they are not actively using technology, the systems around them, transportation, communication, health, entertainment, are mediated by algorithms and data, of course. And our children, to navigate effectively this environment, children require what the OECD calls foundational competencies for 2030, which these competencies include critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and of course, digital literacy. And now, here comes computational thinking, because it's well known since 26 that computational thinking provides students of all ages a structured pathway for developing these competencies. And how this is managed? Because these competencies are managed through decomposition, pattern recognition, abstract representation, algorithmic design, testing, and iterative thinking. So, of course, some of you may argue that these skills are not belong exclusively to programming, and I am going to agree with you. They are skills that shape, in general, how children reason about any complex situation, from solving a mathematics problem to planning a story, or even managing a social interaction. But even before touching a computer, young children can develop computational thinking skills through unplugged activities, robotic toys, sequences games, and simple digital tools. Coding, if I have to conclude, is simply the language that gives them form to these ideas. And of course, why now I'm going to try to convince you why early childhood is the ideal window to cultivate this kind of skills. Because cognitive research around the globe shows that early childhood is the optimal period for developing flexible problem-solving strategies. In these years, our children are deeply curious, highly exploratory, not afraid to make mistakes, of course. They are also building symbolic reasoning, and of course, they are developing early executive function. And as a result, especially the very latest coding environments, which are designed for the early years, and one of the most developmentally appropriate environment is Scratch Junior, which I'm going to represent in the second part of my presentation, map perfectly onto these developmental characteristics, as they use visual command blocks instead of text, stories instead of syntax, characters instead of variables, and play and exploration instead of formal algorithms. Through this design, children now are able to internalize the logic of cause and effect, sequencing and debugging without experiencing frustration or cognitive overload. And from a developmentally psychological perspective, computational thinking is a natural extension of early literacy. Children learn that symbols can represent meaning and can be manipulated to express ideas. And as a result, this is why OECD and other organizations like international organizations like UNESCO, for example, stress that delaying digital literacy until adolescence is ineffective. Adolescents approach new symbolic languages, such as coding, with stronger fear of failure, more fixed mindsets, and less cognitive flexibility. On the contrary, early exposure since the beginning of early childhood education reduces this fear and develops intuitive fluency. And this is also a very nice diagram you can see here, why all these great major ideas are interconnecting: programming, computer science, computational thinking, and of course, computing. And as I already mentioned, on the contrary, what was believed decades ago, or what Piaget supported through the development stages and so on, now all the international research support the idea that all these kind of pillars of computing can be educated in the very early years educator. And to continue, also one of the strongest reasons for really computational thinking is acuity. What I mean for that? The EU Digital Education Action Plan, if you read that, acknowledges that digital camps starts early, even before the age of 10, especially between children with ample technological access and support at home and children with limited exposure, fewer resources, or educational disadvantages. And as a result, if schools around the globe wait until age 11 to 12 to introduce coding activities to children, these inequities become more robust. Students who have had early informal exposure progress rapidly, while those who have not fall behind before the race starts. And as a result, when we are introducing computational thinking skills, coding skills in kindergarten and primary schools, ensures, first of all, the same starting point for all children. This is very important for digital inequality. Second, equal access to the fundamental digital literacies of our era. Third, the reduction of gender stereotypes regarding the role of gender in ICT, as research again has highlighted the fact that these gender stereotypes begin to solidify around age 7 or 8. And finally, we have more equitable participation in future STEM pathways, as European Commission supports in the latest reports and white papers. So, this is not a minor issue, of course. The European Commission clearly states that digital competence is a basic skill comparable to reading and writing. Now, all the time, I'm talking to my students in the university, and I'm saying that compared to the 3 years in the previous 2 centuries, reading, writing, and arithmetics, now we have the 4 years we have to educate our students. The 4th year now is algorithmic. So, in other words, we think that read, write, arithmetic, and algorithmic, all of them as now basic skills. And as a result, ensuring children develop this skill from the very first years of schooling, since the age of kindergarten, preschool education, is a matter of educational justice. And this is very important. So, after all this introduction, of course, we should not misunderstand the point. The argument we have to discuss here is not that children need to be prepared for specific jobs that require coding. Many teachers in Greece, for instance, they believe that we educate children just for specific words who require coding. This is a big misunderstanding and a mistake, of course. Instead, the point is that future labor markets require people who can think computationally regardless of profession. This is the most important point. And also, the OECD predicts that the majority of future professions, even those outside ICT, information and communication technologies, will require data interpretation, algorithmic reasoning, digital collaboration, and the ability of today's students and future workers to understand and to control automated systems, not only to mention AI-driven systems. So, as a result, jobs in art, design, law, education, of course, agriculture, and social services increasingly intersect with digital tools, data, and automation. And computational thinking, therefore, as a result, becomes part of civic competence, not just vocational competence. A child who is able to understand how algorithms operate is better able compared to other children to evaluate digital information, to understand bias, of course, to reason about digital ethics, and make informed decisions in a digital demanding society. And as a result, by beginning computational thinking early, we prepare children not for specific technologies, but for an adapting, evolving, and demanding labor market. This is a misconception that I always, when I'm speaking to in-service teachers in Greece, I'm trying to convince them or just to inform them why it's necessary to cultivate this kind of things even on preschool students, on preschoolers. And here comes coding also as a creative expression. Another common misconception about coding is that coding is a technical, deterministic, or rigid activity. But on the contrary, young children experience coding as storytelling activity, character design, animation, puzzle solving, and creative expression. And also, again, here we have OECD through its reports that highlights that creativity is a core competency for the next generation, for today preschoolers. Because coding environments from young age children support them creativity, to cultivate their creativity by allowing them to design their own characters, to animate narratives, to create interactions, to express emotions through movement and sound, and of course collaborate on digital stories. And as an example, Scratch Junior, the programming environment I'm going to introduce you later, does not teach syntax. Scratch Junior teaches preschoolers and primary school students, of course, how to express ideas through a new medium, similar to painting or music. This provides children with multimodal literacy, the ability to communicate ideas not only through text, as done in the previous centuries, but through actions, interactions, sequences, and of course, behaviors. And as a result, contrary to the popular belief, coding strengthens and not replace traditional literacy. And this is also very important to remember it. And of course, an important benefit is the development of resilience. Computational activities involve natural science cycles of trying, testing, failing, adjusting, and trying again and again and again. This procedure normalizes error as a part of learning. What I'm talking all the time to my students is to treat error when children coding themselves not as something bad, but something beneficial, because they can treat error as a learning time, as a learning opportunity to introduce children new ideas or try to explaining what already think they know. And through error, as a part of learning, children discover that mistakes are not wrong answers, but steps in the process. This is contrary, as already mentioned, what educators believe in the previous century, which is not far away from here. And this stands in strong contrast to highly evaluated models of schooling. This is also very important, where mistakes are penalized. On the contrary, in coding, we treat mistakes as opportunities for learning. And as a result, this fosters a growth mindset, which empirical international research links to improved learning outcomes across multidisciplinary subjects, not only content. in coding, but also in literacy, arithmetics, and other subjects. When children understand from age 5 that problems can be broken down, solutions can be brought, and mistakes can be fixed systematically, they become stronger learners overall, and not only in coding. And as a result, the European Commission, especially in the last report published last April and May regarding the necessity of cultivating space skills to preschoolers and young age children, stresses that young learners must develop digital safety skills, awareness of data privacy, understanding of how digital systems work, and of course, the ability to think critically about information. Children, according to the European Commission, cannot develop these competencies if they see technology as a black box. On the contrary, children, by engaging themselves in simple coding activities, they begin to understand that digital systems are created by people. Algorithms follow rules, and automated behaviors can be designed, modified, and evaluated. And as a result, this early awareness forms the basis of responsive digital citizenship, a key pillar of the European education area. And after all this introduction, if we have to form a coherent learning progression across the school years, we will say that starting early allows teachers to build a coherent cumulative pathway. Computational thinking foundation in kindergarten through play, sequencing, patterns, and of course, unplugged activities. Also, block-based coding from Scratch Junior to Scratch in primary education, robotics and problem-based projects in upper primary education, then integration with science, mathematics, and language arts, and finally, introduction to AI literacy and data literacy in the late primary. And if we delay the introduction of these computational thinking skills, coding skills, and so on until the age of 11 and or 12, this progression, as you can understand, collapses. Early start enables schools and educators, of course, to create a scaffolded, developmentally aligned digital literacy curriculum since the age of kindergarten. And this is the approach the last 3 years we are following also here in Greece. We introduce coding skills, algorithmic skills since the age of kindergarten education, and then we are following the same learning path with most developmentally appropriate programming environments and coding skills, and of course by implementing in all stages unplugged activities since the upper primary education, because later on gymnasium, children are introducing themselves in more advanced programming environments like Python and so on. And of course, what now is the role of teachers and schools in this approach? Both OECD and European Union policy documents emphasize that educator confidence is a critical factor. Early computational thinking and coding do not require, of course, advanced technical expertise. Simply rely on structured research-based tools and also build on pedagogies teachers already use. Which are they? Storytelling, exploration, collaboration, guided play, and so on. So, to sum up, the goal for all educational systems across Europe and, of course, in Western countries is to empower teachers to integrate computational thinking skills naturally, not as an additional burden. This approach does not work, but as an extension of what they already do in classroom learning. Schools also benefit higher students' enjoyment, more inclusive learning pathways, opportunities for interdisciplinary curricula, and of course, a stronger digital culture. And if we want, before finalizing my speech, if I wanted to conclude my speech with a vision for the future, I would like to say that teaching computational thinking skills and of course coding skills early since the years of preschool education is not about creating future programmers. It's about creating problem solvers, critical thinkers, creative designers, digital literate citizens, and of course, lifelong learners. And of course, this approach, which is not solely mine, perfectly aligns with OECD Learning Compass 2030, helping children navigate complexity, uncertainty, and technological change with confidence rather than fear. And with this, I would like to thank you for your patience and your attention of hearing me. This is the first part of my introduction, a more theoretical part, in which I would like, and I hope I did it, to convince you that, or why introducing this kind of skills is a necessity since the early years. And of course, I'm now more than happy to hear you any questions if you have, or your own experience, because Vincentas informed me that many of you are children from in preschool education or even in early primary education. So if you have similar experience, or if you want something else to conclude on your experience in Lithuanian educating system, or for instance, if Lithuanian educating system now also focus on introducing these coding skills and computational thinking skills since the early years of education, or follows a different approach, introducing, for example, these skills in lower secondary school or just on high secondary schools, gymnasium or lyceum. So, Vincentas, if the participants want to speak, to ask something, or if they want to share their expressions, their feelings, I'm more than happy.
Oh, of course, no problem. Students, please, if you have some questions or issues, or just critics, because also.
Of course, maybe they do not agree.
Okay, at least one critics from my side. Quite often, let's say a lot of also researchers, not only researchers, argue that computational thinking is too advanced, let's say too abstract and generally inappropriate for young children. What do you think? Shortly.
Yes, your approach reminds me what Piaget supported in the 60s, that especially for abstract, is too difficult for young age children to understand, and this was the reason why Piaget supported that we have to introduce abstract concepts only in the latest 2 grades of primary school. But what I believe now, not only myself, but the international research support that these concepts now are not so sophisticated even for young age children. But the point is that each time we have to introduce these concepts in a developmentally appropriate way. We have to face, or we have to take in advance, the age of our children, and of course adapt all these kind of activities in the age and the cognitive load of our students. What I mean with that, we introduce different kind of activities, different projects to preschoolers or the students at the lower primary school compared to the students of high school or lower secondary school. So in general, I agree with you, but at the same time, I believe that the point is to adapt the activities to the age and the cognitive load of our students.
Okay, thanks, Stamatios. And the possible Vaida wants to ask something?
Aš
Please.
dėtų lietuviškai pasakysiu, o jūs tada išversit taisyklingiau.
We will try.
Tai, žodžiu, aš norėjau paklausti, pavyzdžiui, Lietuvoje yra atnaujintas ikimokyklinio ugdymo gairės ir jose yra minima, kad vaikai turėtų daugiau laisvės, mokytojas turėtų būti ne iniciatorius, o tik pagalbininkas, suteikiant priemonės ir medžiagą mokymosi. Tai kaip tą kodavimą būtų galima įtraukti, nes kodavime vis tiek yra kažkokios aiškios taisyklės, o atnaujintos programos kaip tik siekia to, kad būtų kuo laisviau vaikams patiems pasirinkti, ką jie nori veikti, kaip ir su kokiom priemonėm.
Oh my God, it's too long. Too long story, but I will try. Colleague Vaida said that in Lithuania we have some, let's say, renewed program or preschool program guidelines, curriculum guidelines, and it's stated that children needs to have more freedom in classroom, in activities, and the teacher is not like main initiator, right? And the question is, if I understood well, how to involve, how to implement this, let's say, technology in general, right or not, Vaida? This was the idea?
Yes.
Okay, yes. If I understood correctly, you describe how the new approach of the Lithuanian system, especially in the early years education, and I believe that is exactly the same concept here in Greece. And as I already mentioned, the approach is correct. Of course, I agree with this approach, and it's exactly what I'm talking to my students who are going to become kindergarten or primary school educators. I believe that the most important things is the correct education of the teachers, because many of the teachers do not know how to effectively introduce children in this kind of activities. For instance, when they are hearing about coding activities, the majority of them, they think that all these activities are screen activities. In other words, children have to be in front of a computer for 40-45 minutes to make projects and so on. And I'm trying to tell them that this is not the correct approach. For instance, here in Greece, in my university, I'm working with Boston College in the United States, and we have adapted a specific curriculum for preschool teachers and also for first grade and second primary school teachers. And in this curriculum, which are based on specific lesson plans, we tell them exactly how to introduce this kind of activities to young age children. And just to conclude, if a lesson lasts 40 to 45 minutes, the activities with computers, with screens, it's only 10 to 15 minutes. All the other activities are activities with free play, are activities unplugged, and in general, free screen activities. because it's not necessary that children all the time have to work with computers in order to introduce themselves with coding activities. Also, maybe this Vincentas will be another webinar. I am teaching my students the use of educational robotics, and I do not know if you know the microbit. For instance, now in kindergartens, we are introducing microbit because it's a very cheap and very effective robotic kit. It costs only 20 euros compared to 130 euros that a Bebot costs. And with that, children can work with microbit, and with the use of battery, can take the robotic kit outside the classroom to go to the park and make activities, go in other classes within the school and make activities. So what I want to say is that we can also introduce coding activities, computational skills activities, even without screens, even without being inside the classroom, but by using physical computing and bridging the natural and the digital world. But this may be another webinar, Vincentas.
Okay,
the use of educational robotics.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks a lot, because the time is running quite fast as usual. Yeah,
Yes.
possible. Let's turn to have a second part, and at the end some questions and discussion.
Yes,
okay.
Of course, because I want also to have time for the students, to see some also the environments, because I don't know, for instance, how many of you are working with Scratch Junior, or at least you know Scratch Junior? One? I can count only one. If I'm not wrong, I count only one hand, Melika, if I read it correctly. So, yes, okay, yes, I read, yes. So, all the other students, you are not know about that. Okay, and how many of you are familiar with Scratch? None. Okay, this is a bit surprise for me, because Scratch is very, very, very popular programming environment. So, Vincentas, we also need a webinar regarding Scratch and Scratch Junior. Okay.
If you would reserve extra time, instead, let's say 24 hours, some additional hours.
Okay. Or maybe I will come when I come again to Lithuania, we are going to make this inside.
Stamatios, we already agreed next year in April, during our conference, during your visit, 2 webinars.
Yes, we are going to make some workshops, because I believe that the teachers and your students are going to love Scratch Junior and Scratch, because they are going to find it very, very effective in their daily teaching practice. So,
okay, we will see after your presentation.
Yes, of course. So, I'm going to share now my second presentation. I hope to enjoy it. Okay, so in my second part of my presentation, as you already can see, we are going to explore Scratch Junior and Scratch in early education. So, to make a connection with the previous presentation, I believe we have established now why computational thinking and coding should begin in the earliest years of schooling. And after that, we are thinking to find developmentally appropriate tools to make this introduction more effectively. And international research, not myself, international research supports through extensive research that we have 2 research validated age-appropriate programming environments in education which we can use. It's Scratch Junior and Scratch. And both environments were created at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, as already known, in collaboration with educational researchers and designers, and both are grounded in the constructionist learning theory, which, if you remember, originally developed by Seymour Papert and later expanded by Mitch Resnick in the MIT, and more especially through the lifelong kindergarten group at the MIT Media Lab. And their development has also involved Tufts University for Scratch Junior, and of course the Scratch Foundation, who gives all the necessary money to improve all this kind of environments and to be free for us, of course. And these environments are widely used around the world because they offer children a meaningful, playful, and creative entry point into programming and computational thinking, of course. Okay, let's move to the next. Okay, so let's make a first introduction to Scratch Junior. This is how we call it. Here in the presentation, you can see in this slide the user interface of the programming environment. Before speaking, you can see how playful it is, how nice it is, how gender neutral it is, and of course, how easy it is for young age children and also for the teachers, of course, to syntax code. They are not writing code, they syntax code. And let me introduce now why Scratch Junior supports coding for young age children and especially for ages 5 to 7 years old. Scratch Junior, as already mentioned, is designed for early childhood and early primary education. It was created by a collaboration between the MIT Media Lab, Tufts University Developmental Technologies Research Group, and the Playful Invention Company. Its design, and this is very important, is based on an understanding of early childhood cognitive and motor development. What I'm meaning for that? This is very important to remember that preschoolers, first of all, cannot read and cannot write. And if you see here in the environment, there is no text. Of course, there are some numbers, but they are minimal and even not necessary. So, why Scratch Junior works for young age children? It works because Scratch Junior is built specifically for children who are still developing their fine motor skills, their symbolic reasoning, early literacy skills, and of course, basic sequencing abilities. And in order to accommodate these states, Scratch Junior uses large, colorful programming blocks. These are here are the command blocks that Scratch Junior uses. Also, as already mentioned, uses icon-based commands instead of text. You can see here are the commands. Children are using commands to make projects, or in other words, to programming, like connecting pieces of a puzzle. Also, Scratch Junior support symbol sequencing. You can see that children use the command blocks in a sequence. This is not very difficult for them to understand. It uses no syntax at all, no typing at all, and of course is giving a heavy emphasis on storytelling and play. In other words, what children need to engage in the learning process. And of course, as a result, This makes coding accessible to children who cannot yet read or who are just beginning to learn to read. Sorry, here we are now. And how we can now implement it, early computational thinking in these environments, in Scratch Junior. Although I already mentioned that Scratch Junior is a simple programming environment, it's also very powerful for preschoolers, and as a result, introduces the fundamental ideas of computational thinking. How? Because supports children to understand sequencing. How? Because children have to learn to arrange actions in order to build a project. Also supports events. Children learn that when beginning an action, something happens. For instance, they press the green flag, they tap on a character, and so on. It also supports loops and repetition, even for preschoolers. Children can learn how to make an action repeating multiplied times. Also, this is very important for a programming environment oriented for preschoolers that also supports parallelism. In other words, children can program 2 or more characters to act at the same time. Of course, it also supports debugging. Children not only program, but also they can find and fix mistakes. And last but not least, it also supports modularity. Children are able to create small, manageable sequences. And as a result, this foundation creates a bridge toward more complex programming in later years. So, if I wanted to highlight the pedagogical strengths of Scratch Junior, I will say that Scratch Junior is built around early childhood pedagogies. In other words, it supports storytelling, it supports creative expression, it supports exploration, it supports guided play, it supports collaboration, and of course, supports multimodal language. In other words, movement, sound, and visual design. As a result, children learn through designing their own projects. As Mitch Resnick says, children using Scratch Junior, they express themselves, an approach strongly connected to the theory of constructionism, what Seymour Papert supported since the latest 70s. And if you don't know or you don't remember who Seymour Papert was, because died 2 years ago, was the man who invented Logo, the first programming languages for education, Logo, from the Greek word logos, and of course invented the tactile, an approach that all other programming environments for children are following even today. And as a result of it, Scratch Junior supports a really cross-curricular integration. In other words, Scratch Junior easily integrates with literacy because children create stories, character interactions, and so on. It also integrates with mathematics because children learn sequences, directions, patterns, recognition, measurement, and so on. Also, Scratch Junior supports science learning because children can make projects, digital stories, refer to life cycles, movement, weather simulations, the 4 seasons. This is a very popular activity in Greece, 4 seasons and so on. Also integrates very easily with social standings, with community roles, and so on. And of course, supports and integrates arts using animation, sound, visual design, and so on. And as a result, these integrations are widely documented in teacher practice worldwide. And after Scratch Junior, as we grow up, we have to move in another creative coding platform, but which oriented for primary school students since the age of 8. What is Scratch? Scratch was developed at the MIT Media Lab and now is maintained by the Scratch Foundation. Scratch Foundation is a non-profit organization, and this is the reason why Scratch is completely free. Also, Scratch Junior is completely free. This is very important. And also, of course, as you can see here, it's also a block-based programming environment which runs on the web, but also, if we want, we can run it offline in our laptop or computer devices. So, what makes Scratch so powerful around the globe? You can, if you make a search on the web with the words Scratch statistics, you can see that there are millions, over 250 million users, they are using Scratch. So, what makes it so powerful? Because, as you can see already here in the screenshot, Scratch replaces coding syntax with visual programming command blocks. Also, it's very powerful because it can introduce variables, loops, conditionals, events, parallelism, and messaging. Complex concept. Also, what is very important for teachers and for students as well is that includes a full sound, visual, and animation environment. If you ever had programmed with other environments, you can see that it's very difficult to make a multimedia app because you have to use too many external programs instead only of the coding environments. You have to use a different program for sound editing, another program for image editing, another program for the graphics. Here, everything is included within the environment Scratch. This is very important. Also, it supports sprites. The cat is a sprite, has a library full of sprites, supports backdrops. Here there are a library of backdrops, and of course, many assets which we can customize based on our needs. And of course, what is also very important, and this is also the name of the Scratch, allow users to share their projects online in a moderated community. This is exactly why, as the users of Scratch, we are calling Scratchers. It's exactly similar like the music. The people who create music by mixing other music. This is exactly the main idea of Scratch. We are taking a project from another person who is freely available to us, and we are working on it to make our own project. And of course, instead of that, Scratch moves also learners into deeper programming concepts, including conditional logic, if else blocks, variables and data, loops, and nested loops, event-driven programming, parallel processes, broadcast communication via messages, basic algorithmic problem solving, and of course, designing complex systems. The notion of Scratch is what Mitch Resnick wrote in a paper, is that Scratch supports low floors, wide walls, high ceiling. And in case you have never heard that before, this means that Scratch it's very, very easy, even for a novice programmer, after a few minutes of interaction, to make a project. This is very important compared to your experience, if you have that, in a textual programming language like Java, like C++, which is very, very difficult for a novice programmer to create a project in a few minutes. Also, as I already mentioned, Scratch supports wide walls. This means that a novice programmer can make a huge, really a huge variety of projects. And high ceiling means that based on the expertise of the programmer, can a student make some simple projects, which okay, but also can make very complex projects. It's up to him or to her. So, as a result, these concepts reflect the foundations of modern software design, but also, which is very, very important for novice programmers, our students' case, a child-friendly form. And also, Scratch supports animated stories, interactive games, simple simulations, digital art, science models, music projects, mathematical puzzles, and so on. And of course, these possibilities make Scratch a natural fit for project-based learning, cross-curricular interaction and integration, of course, and developing students' agency. And this is the reason why teachers around the globe, they are using Scratch. And of course, what is also very, very important, and I'm going to present it to you, is that Scratch is working also as a secure social platform, because a very, very important feature of Scratch is its online community, which is moderated to ensure child safety. It's not like a Facebook of projects, it's a very secure web site and community. It also encourages sharing, remixing, and peer feedback, very important. Also, expose children, but also educators as well, to diverse ideas and creative practices, and of course, fosters digital citizenship and online collaboration among users of all ages. And of course, to remember what OECD and EU supports, this aligns strongly with OECD and European Union emphasis on collaborative learning and global competence. So, now, after having introduced Scratch Junior and Scratch, if I wanted to present to you a developmental progression between Scratch Junior and Scratch, I could say that together, Scratch Junior and Scratch form a developmental progression from age 5 to 12 and beyond, of course. Because, for instance, children can begin with simple sequences in Scratch Junior and then move to conditional logic and data management in Scratch. Also, children can move from playful stories to interactive systems. In other words, young children can animate a character walking across a screen, but older children can build games with scoring systems, branching narratives, simulations of physical phenomena, and also basic artificial intelligence style behavior using specific sensing blocks. Scratch now, the last 2 years, has a special lab. It's called Artificial Intelligence Labs, where you can go there and play with artificial intelligence and make very nice projects to help young age children introduce themselves, and of course I understand artificial intelligence basics. Also, Scratch Junior projects are usually short and teacher guided. On the contrary, Scratch projects are longer, open-ended, and student designed. You can see the difference, but this difference between the complexity of project of Scratch Junior and Scratch is what we want, because there are different developmental needs of young age children to older students. Of course, after that, if I wanted to highlight the educational value of Scratch Junior and Scratch, I would like to say and support that both programming environments are lowering entry barriers. Why? Because, first of all, and we are going to see them in my presentation, there are no installation barriers. For instance, Scratch Junior works on apps, works on computers, while at the same time Scratch is web-based. There are no cost, in other words, are completely free. This is very important for me and for schools, because they don't have all the time the necessary funding to buy license and so on. They support no syntax error, because children are not writing code, they just moving command blocks. There are no syntax errors. And of course, what is very, very important, supports many languages and literacy levels. For instance, both environments are supporting Greek language, which is not so famous because we are only 10 million people. I believe, Vincentas, that exactly the same happens with the Lithuanian language, because you are more or less than Greek people. And many environments that not support the not so famous languages. They support only Spanish, English, German, French, and so on. Also, what is important for me, they have built both environments following 21st century competencies. What I mean with that? I mean that they are aligned with OECD Learning Compass, they are aligned with European Union Digital Competence Framework, with the Digital Education Action Plan priorities, and of course, with the European Education Area Digital Skills Indicators. And, of course, both programming environments can fit naturally in existing curricula in schools. Scratch Junior fits because supports storytelling, early mathematics, science exploration, early numeracy, early literacy, and so on. On the other hand, Scratch also fits naturally in existing curricula because supports mathematics, science, art, social studies, language, and so on. And of course, they also support diverse learnings because both programming environments supports multi-language students with learning difficulties. In Greece also, Scratch Junior and Scratch are supporting not only in general education, but also in special education. Students with struggle with text-heavy tasks, and of course, support students who benefit from interactive visual learning. And as I conclude to my presentation, why these two environments are appropriate for schools? They are appropriate because they are, as already mentioned, free and open. They have developed by reputable and well-recognized academic institutions. In another webinar, we have to discuss about the quality of educational apps who are mentioned, or more specifically are self-proclaimed as educational in the two big app markets, in Play, Google, and Apple. The majority of them have no real educational value, but this is a point of another webinar. They are also both pedagogical grounded. They are safe and age appropriate. They are flexible for various curriculum needs. They can be easily adapted. And of course, both, and especially Scratch, are supported by extensive teacher communities. And of course, what is very important to remember is that there is no commercial motive. The mission is educational equity, creativity, and global access. And as a conclusion to my presentation, we are going to move in these programming environments. We are going to see them working in action. And I am going to present you how children can use Scratch Junior to build their first animation stories, how primary students and of course teachers can use Scratch to design games and so on, and how both environments support the development of computational thinking in playful, inclusive, and developmentally meaningful way. To conclude, both Scratch Junior and Scratch, in my opinion, create a complete research-based pathway that helps young learners and educators, of course, to become creative, confident, and capable digital thinkers. So, in this point, I will stop my presentation, and again, Vincentas, I will leave time for your students, or even you, if you want to make some question regarding these both programming environments, as we are going to move to the presentation of this. Here we are. So what we are watching now, this is the official site of Scratch Junior. Here we can go if we want to find more details for Scratch Junior, and also, first of all, from here we can download it. We can download it for if we have iPad. We can download if we have a tablet running Android. And why I'm referring to tablets? Because this app and Scratch as well are oriented for tablet devices because they benefit from the large screen. But for instance, some of my students do not have tablets. You can also install the app on your mobile devices. What also we have to learn. If you want, you can go here, and what is very important is what I already mentioned, it's free. It's free. Here, if we go in Learn, we can see the interface of the app. Here, if we want, we can go and see how the app works. Here is an embedded paint editor, very powerful. Children love to use it because they can paint a character, they can create their own characters. In other words, they can express themselves. Here, we have the block descriptions, or other words, the command blocks students and teachers can use to make powerful projects. You can see there are many of command blocks. Some of them are very interesting. For instance, a character can make something when the child goes and threats him. Some characters can do something when they collapse, and so on. Also, here, if we go, what is also important is you can see that the blocks are grouped based on their functionality. For instance, all triggering blocks are yellow, or moving blocks are blue, and so on. In this case, the children, after a few minutes of interaction with the application, can easily work with the project and, of course, understand other projects, because with their minds they remember the work of each block. This is very important. Here on Teach, there are ready-made activities or learning scenarios. So a teacher who wants to work with the app has ready-made scenarios to work with the students as a very beginning, and of course also to accustom himself or herself to the environment. Here in the resources, there are also a lot of resources where teachers can go and use it. For instance, here, this is very important for me. You can see here it says printable block images, and there is a PDF you can download. What this means for a teacher? The teacher can download it, and then if I download it and share it to you to understand it, what I'm meaning, just a moment to share it, the PDF, you can see, because we already talked about unplugged activities, you can see here in the PDF that I downloaded, there are the motion blocks, actually all blocks, but you see in a natural size, you see how big it is. So what I am doing with my students or with the teachers, I educate them. We download this, we printed this, and then we use it with our students, the preschoolers, to make unplugged activities. For instance, students learn that when they use this block with another child, the child has to move on the left one step. And of course, we can use all the other blocks here, see if you can see. So in this way, we don't have to use Scratch and Screen all the time to introduce children into coding activities. We can make very nice, playfully unplugged activities, and then later on to introduce students into Scratch environment, Scratch Junior environment. But prior to this, they have already accustomed themselves in the command blocks which Scratch Junior uses, their philosophy, and so on. This is very, very important. And my students describe that they find it very useful for them and for the children as well. I'm going to stop share this. I'm going to return back to the programming environment. Okay, here also you can see this one, this section, it calls printable blocks for stickers. Here we can make stickers, and we can also use it with our students to make also unplugged activities. And especially here in Greece, we are using them to play the activity, the program, the student and the robot. I don't know, I suppose you're familiar with this activity. One student takes the role of the driver, another student takes the role of the robot, the driver puts stickers on the robot, and the robot moves following the stickers, command, and so on. All these are unplugged, playful activities. And of course, what is also very important for me and for you, if you want to work with that, is this one, Scratch Junior Connect. This is an online library where teachers around the world have gone and have uploaded projects or activities. For instance, if we go here to browse activities, you can see that there are educators around the world, and they have uploaded their own activities. So another teacher from Lithuania, for instance, can go here, can see this activity, what's about, can see that it's for kindergarten, for first grade, second grade students. It's also an activity can be work both at school and at home. And if wants to adapt it, just has to go here on the details and download it and use it. This is very, very, very important. There is a live gallery of activities where especially non-experienced teachers can go and find activities and or projects. Here, for instance, you can find ready-made projects. You can see the tic-tac-toe. You can make a project with your students to play tic-tac-toe. Or what else? Dino games and so on. This is very, very important for me. And I will go back to the website. Here we are. And of course, here there are also some ideas how to make family days in your school, how to host a family day, and so on and so on. And now, this is the site. Some of you, or usually in Greece, when I am introducing them, they are asking me all the time another question. Can you imagine which question? The question Vincentas and your students is, okay, how can I download this app for computers? Because many kindergarten in Greece do not have tablets, they have computers. So, another benefit of this app is that it's open source. Every programmer around the globe can take from GitHub the source code and adapt it. So, this app, if you see it here, is working only on smart mobile devices. But if we are going here and we write Scratch Junior for desktop, we can see that here there is one side from the open source community where some programmers took the source code of the app, and what they did, they adapted to work on laptops and PCs. And you can see here that we can download the app for Macs, Apple computers, or for Windows computers. So, to sum up, we have an app which is free. We have an app which supports smart mobile devices and PCs. We have an app which supports many, many languages. We have an app who has an active community. We have an app who has a lot of free material. Is there something else we want? And also, there is an app which is developmentally appropriate for young age children. So, I'm asking you as a rhetoric question, is there something else we want from an app in order to use with our students. Maybe we would like to have a more structured curricula. For that case, the Boston College in the United States has, sorry to write it here in the browser, has make, oh, sorry, Google, I'm going to write here in the Google, has make, and maybe this is beneficial for your teachers, has make this curricula, which free available. It's called coding as another language, or simply called curricula. What is this? Here, if we go, and if one of your students wants to see that, there is a ready-made curricula which guide teachers how to introduce Scratch Junior with specific order in kindergarten or in first or in second grade of primary school. And also, we are here some other university. One of these is my university, who have taken the necessary permissions and have translated and adapted this kind of curricula in our cultural and language context. You can see that this curricula is also translated in Spanish, in Hebrew, in Turkish, in Greek, of course, and in Portuguese. This is very important, and this is another nice opportunity for academicians in Lithuania, if they find it helpful, to translate it also in the Lithuanian language, because you can see here there is curricula for pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. For instance, if we go here to kindergarten, you can see that everything is here, and the teacher just do not have to think how I will introduce Scratch Junior in kindergarten, just has to follow what is already written here, with specific guides, examples, material, and this is very important. I am using it with my students in the university and also with in-service teachers in Greek, and they find it really, really helpful for them to learn Scratch Junior, to learn how to introduce coding activities in the classroom, and of course, to learn also the programming environment as well. So, this is all about Scratch Junior, very, very fast, so as to find enough time to introduce you also Scratch. In order to find Scratch, we just have to write scratch.mit.edu. And this is a Scratch. And this is the main interface of the Scratch. My apology, this is in the Greek language. I'm going to make it in the I cannot see how I can change it now in just a moment. Just a moment to translate it in English. Of course, supports also, here we are, settings, language. You can see here, I suppose, supports Lithuanian language as well. Just a moment to find the English here. Okay, so if you can see, this is the interface of Scratch. The idea is very, very simple. We have some sprites. Here are the sprites. If we want, we have a library, many, many, many sprites, so as to create our projects. But we can add characters from the web, which we have downloaded in our PC. For instance, yesterday I downloaded this. So you see, I want to make a space project. So I have a satellite. This satellite I downloaded from site which supports free download. Of course, here, if I don't like the cat, I can remove the cat. Here, I can make backdrops or backgrounds. For instance, I can make this. And now, in a few seconds, I have a character and a background for my project. Now, if I want to programming my environment, as I already mentioned, I do not have to write code. I just have to connect command blocks just to make it bigger. I have just to move command blocks and these blocks to make them connect like puzzle pieces, and you see, and then I have to trigger an event. For instance, I will go here to the event. When I press the green flag, I want the satellite to turn around. Let's make it to see what's happening. You see, all the time the satellite is going to make this action. It's a bit silly, but just a small representation how we and our students are making projects in Scratch. They do not have to write anything. So in this case, we have no syntax errors, which is very, very important for novice programmers. Of course, on the contrary, we have logical errors in the idea. And this is also very important for us because, as I already mentioned in the first part of my presentation, the debugging is a high-order thinking skill, which further helps students to be logical thinkers and 21st century citizens. So, what is also very, very important for me is that here, if I go here, I can see my projects. For instance, this is some of my projects I wrote yesterday, but I want you to see something here. Just a moment. For instance, I can go. This is, for instance, the project. It's not mine. This project is not mine. I didn't make that. It's a project I found from the community, and I remix it for myself and for my needs. As if you remember, what I mentioned is that we have the ability to share and to take projects made by other Scratchers and use it for our needs. For instance, if we go here on the first page of the project, here we can see future projects, future studios, Scratch Design Studio, project by Scratchers I'm following. For instance, if I see here some projects, you see here it's a gallery of projects. Imagine that I want to see this game, the typing game. I can easily take it for myself. How? I am just pressing the game. You see, here is the game. I can see that already 225 people have taken that on their account. 200,000 people have seen this project, so this must be very good project. So if I want to take this project on my account, I just have to press remix. If I press remix, the project is coming now to my account. You see, this is a project. From another person, I took this project on my account. And of course, you can see here too many sprites. It's a complex project. each project has each sprite has its own commands. As if you remember, we can make very complex projects if we want. And what I can do now, if I know programming, I can change some of these commands to adapt it on my needs. Otherwise, I can use it as it is. Let's try to play it. If I play, you see something is doing the cat. You see there is music. It says press space to continue. So I press the space. What's your name? Here it asks me. You see, you can interact with the app. This is very important. Okay. Spare space to continue. Okay, I'm not going to play now with the game, but what I wanted to see is that the remix action is very, very powerful. And of course, in 2 minutes or 5, we cannot see the benefits of Scratch. But I encourage you, in case you don't know the Scratch, just to try and look it more closely when you have enough time, because it's a very powerful app. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going in 2 minutes 3 just to see the interface of Scratch Junior, the other app. So I have downloaded the app on my account, on my PC. I'm now opening, and I'm going now to share again my presentation. Here, share. Okay, I'm here. So what you can see here, this is the interface of Scratch Junior. If I press the house, I can see all the projects I have created. For instance, let's see this project. You can see the interface now is completely different than the interface of Scratch, because now this Scratch Junior is for young age children, is more childish, more child friendly, you see. But what I can do here, if you can see the astronaut, this is myself. The children can make photos of themselves and put the photo in the characters so as to feeling that they are creating their own apps. This is working perfectly with young age children. Also, you can see here the lizard where I went yesterday and make some ears, tongue, and so on. Let's see how easy it is, and this is an ancient table. Let's see how easy we can work with that. If we press here, you can see we have ready-made characters, but if I want, for instance, if I press the full moon and go here to the paint editor, you can see that here I can go take a color, and I want to make the moon to have seas, to have many different colors and so on. And if you see now, this is a new character. This is a very nice idea because children can create their own characters. Also, here we have a lot of backdrops. Children do not have to seek for backdrops. They can use backdrops who fit to their needs. And of course, if I want to program the astronaut, see how easy it is. I will take again the green flag. You can see the similarity between the two projects. This is very important because we are creating now a learning path from Scratch Junior to Scratch. So the commands are the same. I want the astronaut to walk for a few steps. I want then to become bigger. I want to make a sound. and then to move in another page. Here you can see page 1, page 2. Let's see what's happening. This is my voice because I can use what else, what is important. Children can use this microphone and record their own voice. And also, based on my experience, the students find it very, very useful for them. And that's all.
Stamatios, we have 5 minutes.
Yes. I know that. So I'm going to stop now. And of course, I understand that in 5 or 10 minutes, we cannot introduce ourselves into very robust programming environments. For instance, I spent a semester with my students to educate them in their logic and in activities. But what I wanted to present is that it's not something difficult to introduce this kind of coding skills in early year education, because now we have the appropriate tools to use to work with our students. This is very, very important.
Okay. And possible you can open some in chat window. We have some questions. Very shortly, quickly, can you comment?
One from Laura. Yes, I can see that. One from Laura. Yes, I already mentioned that in the Greek kindergartens, especially, we don't have access to enough numbers of tablets. But on the contrary, we have access on PCs. So this is very important for me, that there is also a version of Scratch Junior who works to computers. On the contrary, on primary schools, we have also enough numbers of tablets, and we have also separate computer labs where children with their students can go and work there. So this is very important for me, because these tools are working in multiply forms of devices. What kind activities? For a 2-year-old children. This is a very nice question. Of course, for 2 years, only unplugged activities, to follow the recommendation of doctors that we should not introduce young age children in screens. But if you remember on my presentation, a nice idea is to visit the CAL curricula, because now Boston College has created a specific curricula for pre-K. Here, if you visit it, you can find nice activities for the very young age children. And from Egl, if I read it correctly, we do use Scratch, although I'm not familiar. Okay, now it's a very nice opportunity to become familiar with it. Otherwise, wait for another dedicated webinar for Scratch. Vincentas.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Stamatios.